to have a couple of young filmmakers, 27 years old, come in and find new life in the movie. Rocky's story has basically been told.
On screen, Sylvester Stallone has forgiven betrayal, absorbed beatings, and still gotten back up for one more round. Off-screen, he has not always been so forgiving. Across 5 decades in Hollywood, Stallone built a reputation as a fighter who protected his work like it was his own flesh and blood, and more than once, that instinct put him on a collision course with some of the biggest names in the industry. These were not tabloid inventions or manufactured drama for a press tour. They were real ruptures, born out of pride, money, loyalty, and the kind of wounded ego that fame tends to magnify rather than heal. Today we are going back through Sylvester Stallone's career to look at 5 actors whose paths crossed in ways that left lasting scars, according to interviews, memoirs, and reporting from entertainment journalists who covered these stories as they unfolded. We start in 1974, years before Rocky Balboa existed anywhere but in Stallone's imagination. He was a struggling actor doing whatever work he could find, and one of those jobs was a modest coming-of-age drama called The Lords of Flatbush, a film set among a group of young toughs in 1950s Brooklyn. Stallone had a hand in shaping the script, and the role of Stanley meant something to him personally, since it drew on his own childhood. Cast alongside him was a young Richard Gere, an actor with a very different background, trained in theater and known for a more deliberate cerebral approach to performance. The two styles never meshed. By most accounts from people who worked on the low-budget production, tension had been building between them for weeks, and it finally erupted during a scene shot inside a cramped car with several cast members packed together. Gere, according to accounts later given by cast and crew, was still eating lunch when a mustard-topped sandwich ended up on Stallone's clothing. What might have been a minor forgettable moment on a commerce set instead triggered a physical confrontation, and Gere was subsequently let go from the production, with his role recast and res-hot with actor Perry King. The official reason given at the time was creative differences, a phrase that has covered a multitude of sins in Hollywood history, but those who were there understood it differently. Stallone had asserted control over his own project in the most forceful way available to him, and Gere, still years from Hollywood stardom of his own, carried that memory forward. Both men would go on to build significant careers, Stallone through Rocky and Rambo, Gere through American Gigolo and An Officer and a Gentleman, but the two never worked together again, and the chill between them reportedly lingered for years. Money, rather than pride alone, was at the center of the second rupture, this one playing out decades later and in full public view. Stallone and Bruce Willis had spent years as peers at the top of the action genre, Stallone carrying Rocky and Rambo through the 80s and 90s, while Willis defined an entirely new kind of action hero with Die Hard. When the genre began to cool and both men aged out of the roles that once came easily to them, Stallone conceived of The Expendables, an ensemble throwback designed to reunite the action stars of that earlier era for one more run. Willis joined the first film as the enigmatic operative Church, and the partnership seemed to work exactly as Stallone had hoped, evoking a sense of camaraderie among old friends rather than a calculated cash grab. The first 2 films performed well at the box office, and there was real momentum going into a third installment. Then negotiations for Expendables 3 broke down. According to reporting from entertainment trade outlets at the time, Willis's asking price for a handful of days of work reportedly reached into the millions, a figure that struck Stallone as wildly out of step with the spirit of the franchise he had built. Rather than negotiate quietly, Stallone addressed it publicly, criticizing Willis in interviews and on social media, at one point describing him as driven by greed rather than loyalty to the project. Willis's role was rewritten and ultimately filled by Harrison Ford, and the film moved forward without him. The financial numbers still worked out reasonably well for Expendables 3, but many who followed the franchise noted that something intangible had shifted, the sense of an actual brotherhood replaced by the optics of a business dispute conducted through the press. Few of Stallone's professional conflicts, however, cut as deep as the falling out with Eddie Murphy, because this one began as a genuine friendship rather than a professional partnership. In the mid to late 1980s, the two men were among the biggest stars in the world, Stallone carrying the action box office and Murphy dominating comedy with Beverly Hills Cop and Coming to America, and by all accounts from the period, their relationship extended well beyond industry courtesy into real camaraderie. That began to unravel during the production of Beverly Hills Cop 2 in 1987, when Stallone's then-wife, the Danish actress and model Brigitte Nielsen, appeared in the film alongside Murphy. Rumors of an affair between Nielsen and Murphy began circulating in gossip columns of the era, the kind of speculation that tabloids in that decade traded in freely regardless of evidence. Whether or not there was any truth to the whispers, the effect on Stallone's marriage and his friendship with Murphy was corrosive. Reports from the period, including later reflections from those close to both men, described a confrontation in which Stallone pressed Murphy directly about the rumors. Murphy has maintained that nothing improper occurred, and there has never been definitive evidence to the contrary, but the damage to the friendship was done regardless. The two men drifted apart publicly, no longer appearing together at industry functions, and the warmth that had once defined their relationship never fully returned. It stands as one of the more sobering examples in Stallone's career of how quickly trust can collapse under the weight of speculation, true or not. The fourth conflict unfolded on a film set rather than in gossip columns, and it involved one of the true legends of an earlier Hollywood generation. In 1982, fresh off the massive success of Rocky, Stallone was preparing to bring a very different character to the screen, a haunted Vietnam veteran named John Rambo in an adaptation of David Morrell's novel First Blood. Kirk Douglas, whose career stretched back through Spartacus and Paths of Glory, signed on to play Colonel Sam Troutman, Rambo's former commanding officer. Almost immediately, creative friction emerged. Douglas, drawing on the novel's original ending, in which Rambo is killed by Troutman, pushed hard for that conclusion to be restored in the film, believing it gave the character and his own role greater dramatic weight. Stallone, who had worked for months shaping the project and saw the character's survival as essential to the story he wanted to tell, refused to budge. According to accounts from those involved in the production, including later interviews given by director Ted Kotcheff, the standoff grew heated enough that Douglas ultimately walked away from the project just before filming was set to begin. He was replaced within a matter of days by Richard Crenna, who stepped into the role with almost no preparation time and delivered a performance widely credited with giving the film its emotional anchor. First Blood went on to become both a critical and commercial success, launching one of the most enduring action franchises in film history, and Stallone would later describe the standoff with Douglas as an early lesson in how far he was willing to go to protect a project he believed in, even against an actor whose career he had admired growing up. The final name on this list is less a story of betrayal than of one of the longest-running rivalries in modern film history, and it began fittingly at an awards show. In 1977, Stallone arrived at the Golden Globes riding the success of Rocky, nominated in multiple categories after a personal and professional comeback that had taken him from near poverty to the center of the industry. Also in the room that night was a relatively unknown Austrian bodybuilder named Arnold Schwarzenegger, who was there for his own recognition as a promising new talent. According to Stallone's own later retelling, Schwarzenegger's confidence that evening struck him as almost comical, until Rocky came up empty across its acting nominations while Schwarzenegger walked away with an award of his own. What followed was more than a decade of genuine competition between the two men, as each moved through the 80s building an action movie identity that seemed engineered, film by film, to outdo the other. Stallone had Rambo, Schwarzenegger answered with the Terminator and Predator. Physiques grew more extreme, box office numbers were tracked against one another, and there were even reports at the time of the two men maneuvering to claim or avoid certain film projects purely to spite each other. It was intense, occasionally absurd, and by the accounts of those who covered Hollywood during that era, entirely genuine rather than manufactured for publicity. Yet unlike the other conflicts on this list, this one eventually softened with time. Both men have spoken openly in later interviews and in their own memoirs about how the rivalry gave way, gradually, to mutual respect and eventually real friendship, culminating in shared film projects and public affection that would have seemed unthinkable during the peak of their 80s-era arms race. Taken together, these 5 relationships tell a more complicated story than the image of Sylvester Stallone, the invincible screen fighter, might suggest. They show a man capable of holding a grudge for decades, but also, in at least one case, capable of setting one down entirely. Fame rarely offers a clean narrative, and Stallone's history with these 5 actors is proof that even the toughest characters he ever played were, in the end, shaped by very human conflicts, the kind built on wounded pride, broken trust, and the slow, uneven work of moving forward anyway.